Our first speaker this morning, I'm extremely happy to have him here, Doug Parker. He is my counterpart in California. He directs the Water Resources Research Institute. There are 54 of those in total, one in each state. Doug has been a leader among the Institute folks and the Institute organizations across the country. The initial 4 are from territories of the U.S., so we get 54. Doug has been on a speaking circuit probably that would put almost anyone to shame and make most of us dizzy because of his knowledge, his ability to communicate, and his intricate link with the challenges they've been seeing and experiencing in California lately. Doug is as I mentioned, the Institute Director for Water Resources. He's actually the California Water Resources and Strategic Initiative Leader at the University of California in the Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. As I mentioned, he's been a leader of these institutes for a variety of years. People look to him often, frequently. How many phone calls you get a day?
I stopped answering my phone.
Okay. But he answered one. That was the one that we sent to him. So please help me welcome Doug to the podium.
Thanks, Rick. It's really nice to be here. Good morning to everybody. It's a little early California time, but I think I've had a little coffee, so we're ready to roll. So what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about the drought in California and El Niño. People have been talking about both a lot lately. Is it raining? Is it pouring? Is it not? So I'll give a little bit of an overview of the California water supply. It's very different, obviously, than Iowa. I grew up in California, but I spent 14 years out at the University of Maryland working on Chesapeake Bay issues and nitrate groundwater problems, things like that. So I understand different types of agricultural systems. So we'll talk a little bit about California's water supply, water use in California. Then we'll talk about El Niño and the drought, and California's response, and this idea that we need to solve a problem. And I'll spend a little time on that and end with sort of a discussion of how do we deal with this issue of variability that's not just in California but common across many areas. So this is a map of precipitation levels in California, annual precipitation. And what you can see from the map is we have quite a bit of geographic variability in California, with most of our precipitation taking place on the north coast. And then these are the Sierra Nevada mountains here. We are very dry, of course, down in the desert areas, and in our Central Valley, which is where most of the agricultural production is in California, is very dry, which is good, which is why it's such a productive area. Because if you take a nice dry area and you pour water on it from irrigation canals, you get a lot of produce. But what you can see is we have a lot of geographic variability in where the water naturally lands in California. In addition to that geographic variability, we have a lot of annual variability. and this is year to year. So this is the coefficient of variation of precipitation across the U.S. By year. Okay, so what you can see is that on the other side of the Mississippi River, basically, they get about the same amount of precip every year. It may not fall at the same time every year, but they get the same amount. And as you move west, it gets a little more variable. And when you get to California, you get the greatest variation in annual precipitation. And this is evident if you look at stream flows in the Sacramento River. And what this is showing you is average stream flow right here around 15, 16 million acre feet a year. But what you see is extreme annual variability in stream flow in California. And because of that, then we've got to have a lot of different water supplies in California to help us deal with that variability. So we get about 27% of our water from local projects. Some of these are very small, very local, an impoundment, a small dam on a river. Others are quite large, like the San Francisco water system, the East Bay water system, the Los Angeles water system. Those are still local systems, even though they may actually be getting water from 200, 300, 400 miles away. They're controlled by the local government agencies in that sense. We have a very large state water project that moves about 8% of the water in the state. The federal projects have about 20% of the water, not including the Colorado River portions of the federal project. And the Colorado River gives us about 13% of our water. And then groundwater, being about 31, really closer to 36 or 7% average these days, as a water source. And groundwater has become more and more important because groundwater is our bank water. It's what we can rely on in the drought. Our aquifers in California and most of the state do recharge fairly well in wet years. So we're good with that. Unfortunately, we don't do a good job of managing them, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But groundwater is very important in California. This map I'm not going to spend much time on. The point of the map is all of these things are, the blue is the state water projects, the red are federal projects, and the green are local projects. And the idea behind this map is we have the most complex water system in the world in California. Because we need to move that water geographically, as I mentioned before, where the rainfall isn't necessarily where we want the water, because we have a huge amount of annual variation, and we are pretty consistent with our seasonal variation in water. And in that sense, being a Mediterranean climate, we get 75, 80% of our rainfall between from November through the end of March. And then pretty much everything turns off. We'll get a couple storms in April, maybe one in May, and then it's just bone dry in most of the state until October, November again. And that's fairly consistent. So we need to be able to store water for seasonal use, but also for annual use, the annual variations such as the drought. So what we have here, you can see, is that the Sierra Nevadas in the North Coast area, where I showed you previously where all that precipitation happens in California, are lined with a series of dams. And then using rivers, natural water courses, and then canals, we move water north to south, south to north, east to west, a little bit west to east as well. The major dams are and I'll show you some graphs on these later, is that Shasta Dam here is the head of the federal project, and Lake Oroville on the Feather River here is the head of the state water project. And the rest of these dams are much smaller compared to those. Most of that water flows down through the Sacramento River into the delta here, which we have a lot of complications with our delta there. The ecosystem is basically in collapse. We've got endangered species all over the place down here. The water flows through the delta, gets pumped out at the bottom down here into canals that head south that feed the San Joaquin Valley and actually go all the way down and give water to Los Angeles too. So the California Aqueduct, which starts here and comes all the way down almost to Riverside, California, it's about 444 miles long. And we lift that water over 2,000 feet over the Tehachapi Mountains. So we're moving a lot of water in the state. We're actually using a lot of power to move a lot of water in the state too. 3 to 4% of our electricity supply goes to just pumping water in the state of California. And I don't actually think that even includes the groundwater pumping. So we move water all over, but it's getting to these agricultural regions that's most important. Los Angeles has other sources as well, and the Colorado River comes into play. Speaking of the river, okay, so the Colorado is an important part of our supply. I mentioned it was 13% of the water supply in California. One thing to remember with the Colorado River is because the Colorado River links in with, well, Imperial Irrigation District, but also to the Los Angeles area, you in some ways, from a management perspective, the Colorado River Basin and the rest of these California basins are linked. And for instance, when Los Angeles wanted to pull 10,000 acre feet through the delta of its water supply, and they were told they couldn't because there was an endangered species there that meant we couldn't turn the pumps on, they said, okay, fine, we'll take 10,000 acre feet out of our Colorado supply. So the two are linked, and they go back and forth, which is beneficial to someone like LA, because if you've got a drought in one watershed and not in another watershed, of course you're building resilience there as well. But the two are intricately linked. This is the Colorado River's water supply, so the blue line is the supply, the red line is sort of the running average of demand for water, and you can see is that we're basically outstripping that in the basin in Colorado. And one thing to note on this is the Colorado River allocations between the states, so there's 7 states on the river, and the country of Mexico, of course, as well. We've allocated 16.5 million acre feet of water, of the Colorado River water. We've got kind of a problem here because if you look at the long-term average, it doesn't look like we have 16.5 million acre feet. And the reason for that is because we did the allocations right around here. That's when all the negotiations took place. And people thought, yeah, we have 16.5, we're good to go. Okay, so we've got a problem in the Colorado Basin that we've over-allocated the basin. We have treaties with Mexico, so that's not going to be easy to change if we need to do it. So most of it's going to come out of the state. Mexico gets 1.5 million, and then 15 million acre feet get divided between the states. I mentioned groundwater before. We have groundwater basins that recharge pretty well in California. One of the problems we have, though, of course, is that we don't manage it well. And you can see for the Tulare Basin especially, which is that southern San Joaquin Valley Basin, which is one of the most productive agricultural basins in the state, we've got a steady decline in groundwater in that basin. So in the wet years, you can see that it doesn't go down as fast in the wet years, but we're not recharging. So we're constantly withdrawing from this bank account. And this is an issue for California because in the long run, we're not going to be able to have this supply if we don't do something about it. And so we did pass the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in 2014. And so we are now looking at all of our groundwater basins. These are the priority basins, which is, you can see, is where most of the agriculture is in the state. And in each of those basins, we're setting up groundwater management agencies, which of course don't follow political lines because groundwater basins don't. So we've got multiple counties, multiple cities, all fighting each other over who's going to manage this resource. They've got until, I think, next summer, so yeah, July of 2017 to form these agencies. And then they've got about 3 years to write a sustainable groundwater management plan, and then they've got 20 years to implement it. So we're looking at sustainable groundwater management in 2040. Kind of far away, okay? And hopefully a management plan, of course, doesn't mean wait till 2039 to do anything, of course. You need to start with measurable goals the whole way. And the reason it will take that long is because groundwater management isn't just turn off the tap and make people stop pumping. Hopefully it's increased the supply as well. So it's building groundwater basins, it's doing things to increase recharge. And that, of course, will take time to do. So it makes sense that you've got a 2040 time frame. The biggest thing that we've got right now, though, is how do we stop making the problem worse while we try to figure out how to fix it? And I think that's the biggest issue facing in groundwater in California. So let's look at water usage in California. So I'm an agricultural economist by training, so I tend to think supply and demand. So going to the demand side in California, we do have a fair amount of water that is going to environmental purposes. So we've got required delta outflow. So we have a certain amount of water that's in that Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta that has to be maintained because it's an estuary and we're pumping water out of the upper areas of the delta. If we don't keep the outflow high enough, the seawater starts coming in and we get saline water, and we don't want to pump saline water down to Los Angeles for people to drink or down to the Central Valley for us to put on our almonds. So we have to keep a certain amount of water just flowing through in order to keep that salinity barrier in place. We have in-stream flow requirements, wild and scenic rivers. So much of that north coast you saw, okay, that gets a lot of the heavy precipitation, didn't have a lot of dams on it. And that's because California chose back in the late 60s, early 70s to preserve those rivers. So we made them wild and scenic rivers, which means you cannot put dams on them. Okay, I think it's a good choice. We decided that's what we wanted to do for our environment up there. But those rivers aren't really available for other uses then in that case. And then if you get to the more consumptive uses down here, you've got urban uses and agriculture. So urban about 10%, agriculture at 41% of water use. Now people also throw around that it's 80% agriculture, 20% urban. If you ignore these environmental flows, then that's correct. It would be of the developed water that goes to human uses, it's 80-20 agricultural urban. Which of course in a drought causes a lot of issues because everybody who's not watering their lawn looks around and says, well, but they're using a lot more water than we're using. But let's look at the California agricultural industry for a minute. So if they're using 40% of the water in the state, what does that mean? Well, we've got over 80,000 farms in the state. Our agricultural industry is estimated at over $46 billion in receipts to the industry. We've got about 26 million acres of agricultural land. About half of that is pasture and rangeland, and the rest is cropland. 9.5, getting towards 10, although not during the drought, when the drought disappears. Million acres of irrigated cropland, and it's about 2/3 annual crops and 1/3 orchards and vineyards. And so when you think drought, you think, well, I've got 3 million acres of orchards and vineyards, probably want to keep that alive, right? So you're going to need to water that. Annuals, fortunately, you can take those in and out of production during drought years. But the orchards and vineyards not. So we have a complex system that allows us to try to do that. If you look at our agricultural economy, we're the #1 U.S. producer of over 78 commodities in the state, and the only producer really of 14. It's where all of your almonds, artichokes, dates, all of these other crops come from. People, you've probably heard a lot about California almonds and all of the water going to almonds. California does grow 80% of the world's almond supply. And they're still planting almond trees, okay? Because the prices are so good, okay? It's quite profitable to be growing almonds if you can. Pistachios are coming up in the state. Walnuts are kind of going down. And of course, the grapes, raisins, table grapes, and wine industry are all booming in the state as well. So California agriculture being a big user of water, yes, but also it's an important part of our economy, $46 billion, and it's an important part of our food supply, okay? And as most people in agriculture know, you know, it's the value of the food is not necessarily always reflected in the price of the food, okay? And California grows about 50% of the U.S. fruits and vegetable supply, okay? So if you imagine not having that available, you know, we'd have world markets that'd be coming in from elsewhere, but you'd have a whole lot of other issues with that as well. So what's going on in California, current conditions? Are we in a drought? Are we not in a drought? Okay, well, it's been raining. Walk around California and people complain about the rain, and I keep trying to tell them, look, we're kind of only at average. This is what it's supposed to be like. Nobody remembers after 5 years? Okay, I mean, last year was fabulous. I bike from my house to the BART rapid transit system in San Francisco to get to work every day. Last year, I did not miss a day on my bike that was because of rain. Okay, this year, I missed a few, not that many. Usually, if my rule is if I can get to work dry, I don't care what it's like coming home. I'll bike home in the rain. Of course, in California, biking home in the rain, it's still like, you know, 61, 59 degrees, so it's not like biking at 38-degree rainfall. That'd be a whole other story. Wouldn't do that. Or I'd need much better gear. Okay, so it's been raining. We've had quite a bit. We'll talk about that. But what does it mean to be in a drought? Okay, and what does it mean to recover from a drought? Is it my reservoirs are full? Well, that's helpful. But I already told you in a normal year, 35% of our water comes from groundwater. So I need to refill those aquifers. That's not going to happen in a few big rainstorms. That's going to take a number of years for it to happen. But surface water responds to rain, groundwater responds differently, and of course it responds differently in different basins. When you're looking at a state the size of California, the different basins are going to be impacted very differently as well. So here's the U.S. Drought Monitor. This was as of, well, I downloaded it last Thursday. They put it out on Tuesday, or they put it out on Thursday, but they calculated it on Tuesday. And you can see most of California is still in a drought. Of course, starting about last May and going all the way through October, you didn't have hardly any yellows. It was almost all dark red, just a couple little areas of this other red in California. But we're still very much in drought conditions in the state of California. Now, of course, the Drought Monitor doesn't account for the fact in California that, you know, we've got this system of plumbing in the state, right? So this is telling you, drought monitors tell you in California what's going on in the ecosystem, what's going on in the soil, what's the soil moisture. But that doesn't necessarily tell you, you know, is a farm down here out of water, because they're getting water from way up here somewhere, you know, in our system and stuff. So we've actually been doing some work to try to kind of combine the drought monitor with the local water supply conditions to really look at, you know, what's the local water crisis, or is there a local water crisis in California? This This graph is a graph of precipitation in the northern part of the state, and I'll go over it quickly for you in a minute. It starts in October. Our water year goes October 1 through September 30th, so it starts October. The shaded blue is average, okay? And these four right here are the last 4 years of the drought, being well below average. Here's the driest year on record, 1923-24. The wettest year on record was 1983, and then this is where we are this year. And at the beginning of March, people were pretty worried that we were basically about to flatline and end up in another drought year. And then we got some fantastic storms and really quickly brought this up to where we're just a little bit above average right now. I mean, we're well above average for where we are, but if it shuts off right now, we'll still end up with a year of just a little bit above average in precipitation. This is the northern Sierra. The central and the southern Sierra indexes look similar to this, although they probably are much closer to average down here. It's a bit wetter in the north this year than it has been in the south for the average. The scales are different as well because the northern Sierra has the highest precip. So these numbers all come down when you get to the central and southern Sierras. But what you can see is that we've done a pretty good job this year of getting to average precipitation. Okay. Now people asked at the beginning of the year what would it take to end the drought, and again, we've had lots of conversations in California on what would it take to end the drought because it could be refill the reservoirs, but again, as I mentioned, groundwater is important. That's not going to happen in 1 year no matter what we do in California. But the state generally said things, you hear scientists say things like, well, we need 150% of precipitation. In the last 4 years, we've basically, if you compare these to average, we've lost 2 years worth of water in California. But you don't need to get it all back to be out of the drought. In fact, if we got it all back, we'd be in bad shape, we'd be flooding. Okay, but we're not going to get to 150% of precipitation, that's for sure, in California. But we've done pretty well. And one thing also to notice about these graphs is you can see in California, you know, water doesn't just come at kind of a nice steady pace, does it? You know, it's either dry, you're flatlining, or it's raining pretty hard sometimes. Okay, some of those bumps are quite big, and in fact, we've been doing a lot of research on these arc storms or pineapple expresses that we're talking about, where basically this huge amount of, this river of atmospheric moisture comes up from Hawaii and pounds into California, and it will just rain like mad for days. And that's what causes these big spikes. And in fact, if you look at the coefficient of variation, or the variation in the days per year that it takes to get water, California also is very unique in that. So what this shows you is how many days does it take to get half of our total precipitation in the year, okay? And in much of California, half of the precipitation falls in 5 to 10 days every year, okay? And so what happens during the drought is you don't get those 5 to 10 days. You still get the precipitation, but you don't get those heavy precipitations that just nail the state and fill the reservoirs and cause local flooding, right? I mean, you can find pictures probably online right now of flooding in California from last week's storm. Okay, but flooding isn't always the end of a drought in California, okay, because we have these longer term things. But you can see, when you get, I wish I could have the rest of the country on this, but when you get back to the East Coast, you know, you're up above 30, 40 days to get half of the precipitation. In California, most of the states between 5 and 10 days get half of that precip. So it really does come in big events in California. This is the snowpack. We're not doing as well on snowpack as we are on precipitation this year. A lot of our storms have been pretty warm with El Niño. Those pineapple expresses are great, but they're a little bit warm in terms of the snowpack. So if you look at snowpack here, we're running about 96% of average in the northern part of the state and 74% in the southern part of the state. This is the worst year on record with 76, 77. Last year was actually pretty much paralleled this. Last year was most of the year was actually worse than this, but the end result was slightly better, so they still called this the worst year. So last year we ended up with about 5% of snowpack. So we're at 95 to 74, that's pretty good. Snowpack's important in California because a bunch of our reservoirs are also flood control reservoirs. And so right now we actually have several reservoirs in the state where they're starting to release water for flood control. Okay, and at the end of March, basically, most of that flood control problem goes away and we can kind of close the gates and start capturing the snowpack that comes down in May, June, and July. But if we don't have a large snowpack, we can't refill those reservoirs. at the end of the year. So that becomes an important piece in California. Snowpack is about 1/3 of our water supply. Okay, so last year when we had 5% snowpack, that's a big hit for the water supply. This year we're much better off, but projections with climate change do show a definite decrease in snowpack in California. Precipitation may stay about the same, they're estimating, but because it'll be warmer, we're going to get less snow. And so we have a system, you saw that big crazy looking map, we have a system that was designed with 1950s weather in mind, and now we've got to kind of change that and say, how would we manage the system differently if that's the case? This is our major reservoirs in California, and what this shows you is the height of the bar, the total bar is the capacity of that reservoir. The red line in the bar is where that is average level of the reservoir as of whatever date this was. I did this on Monday. So as of Monday of this week, okay, is the red line. And the blue bar tells you where we are right now this year. So as I mentioned, northern part of the state, and especially our two largest reservoirs, are looking pretty good. We've got them up to average for where they should be this year. Last year, these things were at about 30 or 40% of average this time of year. And the year before that, they were actually worse than last year. So you can see as some of the reservoirs have filled, a bunch of them haven't, especially the ones more in the central and the southern parts of the state, as I mentioned, where we haven't gotten as much precipitation. But we're definitely looking better than we did last year, and we're seeing that because what we're seeing is the state and the federal government giving greater allocation. So the Central Valley Project, the federal government's Central Valley Project, which is about 28%, I think it was, of the water in the state, last year their contractors were given a delivery of 0%. Okay? This year they've already said 30%. And the goal, usually April 1st is when we really know what's going to happen. So as April 1st, we'll see if we can get that 30% a little bit higher. The State Water Project last year was at 15%. They're also, I believe, at 30% right now. And hopefully we'll see that go up a little bit higher as well. But it's a big impact, okay? So the severity of the drought we just went through, and we might still be in, it kind of depends on who you talk to, is it was the worst 4 consecutive years in the last 1200. So we've done a lot of tree ring data and stuff to look at it. Last year was the worst snowpack in 500 years. We've had over 2,000 wells in the state go dry. And we've had severe areas of subsidence. We actually have areas in the state that have been subsiding at the rate of about 1/2 inch a month. I mean, that's almost like you can feel it under your feet, it feels like to me, if you're dropping that fast. And of course, that has big implications for infrastructure, roadways, and canals. Canals want to go downhill. You get subsidence, it causes problems. We're losing a lot of canal capacity because of it. The impacts of the drought, of course, a lot of farmland was fallowed. We fallowed about 600,000 acres a year in the last couple of years of farmland. Importing more feed for our dairy and livestock. California is the #1 dairy state in the country, so a lot of feed necessary for that. A lot of culling of herds, as people here would know. A lot of impacts on our ecosystem. Wildfire has been a big thing. But look over here at the economic impact. Not that big, really. Okay, a $2.7 billion hit to the agricultural industry out of a $46 billion industry. Okay, not that big. 21,000 jobs lost. That's quite a few jobs. The biggest issue here, though, of course, is that if you compare those numbers to California, they're super small, right? I mean, the agricultural industry is 5% of the state's economy, and so if you take 5% out of a 5%, you got a pretty minor hit to the state's economy. But most of this happens in certain small rural communities, right? It's not affecting Silicon Valley and Los Angeles, but it's affecting Mendota and all these other small towns in the Central Valley where the unemployment rate is above 50%. So pretty big, but one of the reasons these numbers are so low is look over to this side here. Agriculture lost about 8.7 million acre-feet of surface water, but they increased groundwater pumping by 6 million acre-feet. So the net loss was 2.7 million acre-feet of surface of water to agriculture in California. And again, that highlights the importance of groundwater as a supply in California and the importance of managing it so that it's there in the future when we have the next drought, because we're certainly going to keep having drought. The University of California, of course, has been working on drought issues forever. I actually found some papers from the first dean of the College of Ag in California Dean Hilgard, back in 1880 started doing research on drought in California. So drought's not new to California, although people act like it is. Where'd this drought come from? How come we have this drought? Why do I have to? Like, come on, people, you live in California. You've had drought forever. We've been doing research at the university on it for over 135 years. This is not new. We've done lots of research on irrigation management, everything you can imagine under the sun. This, by the way, over here, you ever eat baby spinach? This is how they harvest baby spinach. They basically plant this stuff in these huge beds, and they just come in and mow it and dump it in a truck, go wash it, and send it to people. It's just amazing to see how they do this kind of stuff. Our Water Institute in California has a lot of water resources out on the drought. We've been very busy with our web, our Twitter feed. As Rick mentioned, I've been getting calls. I've done, I don't know, well over 100 media interviews, everywhere from the LA Times to NPR, New York Times to the Santa Barbara News Press. We've produced a series of drought tips in the state on how do we manage drought, what do you do in almonds, how do you manage if you've got a saline water supply, what do you do in your urban landscape. We produced a series of videos, an online seminar series, okay? So this one kind of amazes me because this is a series of 15, well, they were supposed to be 15-minute videos, but you know how academics are. They all turned into 25-minute videos. But they're basically a bunch of academics standing up like me with a PowerPoint presentation. Who goes online to watch these things? Some of these videos have had over 2,000 hits. Okay, I don't know, I mean, we've got videos on wildfire, we've got videos on what to do with almonds. The most popular one up here actually is a woman, Lynn Hunsinger, from the UC Berkeley, who did those tree ring studies. So the paleoclimatologist, she gets all the best hits. But it's a great presentation if you're ever interested in it. You can go look it up. But a lot of growers watch these as well, so it's quite interesting. I didn't expect that kind of success from basically PowerPoint videos online. We do a lot of events in the state, across the state on drought, a lot of workshops and with our cooperative extension offices in the counties and elsewhere. It had a lot of media coverage. So to kind of get towards the end here, what I'd like to talk about is this idea of how do we solve the drought? I get phone calls all the time from the press. How are we going to solve the drought? When is the drought going to be over? What's going on here? And so I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about, well, everybody's looking for solutions. And these are the basic solutions here. And being an economist, I can tell you the top four kind of are the, okay, increase supply, right? The middle one's like, well, redistribute. And then the bottom one is decrease demand, right? And if we look at, well, we're doing all of those in the state. I think we have to do all of them. We're doing desalination. We've got a plant in Santa Barbara. We just opened in San Diego County, the Western Hemisphere's largest desal plant, 50 million gallons a day of desal, providing 7% of the water supply to San Diego County. It's a fair amount of water from one place. And so we're looking at desal in some areas. Wastewater reuse is big. We have a lot of these purple pipes around California. So purple pipes means it's treated wastewater, so you know not to drink it. Originally, purple pipes were white pipes painted purple, but they became so popular that they actually make the plastic purple now. But we've got a lot of purple pipes. We actually have one of our research extension centers at the university is in Orange County, believe it or not, right there near Anaheim, literally 8 miles from Disneyland. We've got a 200-acre farm, the last piece of open space in Orange County, and we were switched completely over to purple pipe, okay? And the biggest issue isn't pathogens or anything, that's all cleaned up, but the biggest issue is the water is a little more saline. So we're doing a lot of research on how to deal with that. And, can we grow avocados with this water? And so far we're doing okay, but we're learning things. Surface storage, again, we've got 43 million acre feet of surface storage in the state. A lot of people are saying we need more. Can we build more dams? Well, of course, we picked all the good sites first, so there aren't that many good sites left. So each new dam you put in doesn't bring a whole lot of new water option with it. We're also looking at off-stream storage options. So we're looking at building dams in intermittent stream areas and then pumping the water up and into them for storage. Okay? And one of the advantages of that, of course, is you've got much lower environmental impacts because you're not taking out a fish habitat, basically. Because if it's an intermittent stream and it's dry 6 months out of the year, there's no salmon running you need to worry about in that stream. So there are some advantages to being able to do off-stream. Groundwater storage, I mentioned. 38% of our water supply. We're doing a bunch of research now on using agricultural lands, flooding agricultural lands with winter pulse storms to recharge groundwater. So that's sort of the latest thing that we're doing a lot of research on. Trying to look at what's the impact. Okay, I mean, if it's fallow land, that's fine, but if you're flooding, say, alfalfa in California, how long can you flood it before you start to rot the roots and destroy the crop? We're even looking at flooding almonds, vineyards, when they're dormant. How long can you do it before you start to hurt the crop? And it varies, so we've got a lot of research, but it looks very promising. We have a grower in the state who's got vineyards, and he floods them for 6 weeks, okay, and sees no impact on his vineyard. So it's a good area. There's a lot of agricultural land out there that we can do this to really increase groundwater recharge. Reallocation, well, that's a political battle. I don't want to go there. And water use efficiency, the demand side, okay? So water use efficiency is important. We all should use water more efficient. We've seen huge increases in water use efficiency in agriculture in California. Our processing tomato industry, if you look at the production of tonnage of tomatoes per unit of water input, that's increased in efficiency by 54% in the last 25 years. Okay? And that's mostly through work done at the University of California to learn how to use buried drip irrigation on processing tomatoes. So you bury the drip tape about 12 to 18 inches underneath the bed, and you get fantastic tomatoes and fantastic tomato yields. We had to learn how to do it. When we first did it, it actually failed for the processing tomato industry because we actually overwatered the crop. We met all the plant's needs. The plant grew these big, giant tomatoes that were all full of water and had no solids, and you couldn't make ketchup out of it. So everybody thought we're doomed, we'll never figure out how to do this. But what we did figure out is that, yeah, when you get to really high levels of efficiency, you start changing product quality. So we water the tomatoes like mad early in the season, get them up and going. Once the fruit sets, then we start cutting back and stressing them a little bit. So you get a more sugar and more solids in it. Same with blueberries and other crops. We've learned a lot about how to do this. Almonds, we've seen a 33% efficiency increase as well. So let's end with talking about the solutions problem, okay? Like I said, I get phone calls all the time from the press. How are we going to solve the drought? And so I put on my economist hat and I say, okay, well, what they're saying is I've got a problem. Supply doesn't equal demand in every year. Somebody wants this in every year, right? And the solution is, okay, so make supply equal demand, and we talked about that. Increase supply, desal, storage, decrease demand, efficiency, those types of things. And I started thinking about what's the conversation around this in California. So I went online, because no one uses a paper dictionary anymore, and I looked up solutions, okay? And what is the solution? Well, something that is used or done to deal with and end a problem. And it hit me, like, yeah, people, they don't want to talk about drought anymore. Let's get this thing, I got other things, you know, I got a job, I got kids, I got this or that, I got a farm. I don't want to talk about drought anymore. So let's end the problem. Well, the problem is, in California, there is no end to the problem, okay? And so there's two questions here. One is, can we build our way out of it, okay? Can we increase storage on the supply side? Can I fix it? Can I bring that supply up to meet demand? Okay, well, one problem we have in California is we're land rich and we're water poor. Go back to my earlier graph, we've got 26 million acres of agricultural land, okay, and only 9.5 million acres of that are irrigated. So what do you think is going to happen if I build another dam and I create another 2 million acre-feet of water? Someone's going to go in and plant a whole bunch more almonds where there weren't almonds before. And in fact, we're seeing that. We're seeing rangeland and pasture land converted to almonds, okay, and people digging wells and watering them. So if I increase the supply, all I do is increase the demand because people say, hey, more water, right, in a good year. All right, in a drought year, okay, now I can increase the supply and meet current demand, but then the next time it's wet, demand increases, and then the next time it's dry, everybody complains that, uh-oh, now I've got to reduce demand again, right? So there is no solution, supply equals demand all the time in California. Because if you give me more water, I'll plant more crops. Okay? It's similar to what happens with freeways, right? You have a freeway, everything's moving really well. You build a big community out there somewhere that's commuting into the town. The freeway gets all jammed up with cars, traffic slows down. You build another lane on the freeway, right? Traffic moves really well. You build some more houses. Everything slows down again. Okay? Same Same thing. The other side, let's look at the demand side. Can I solve it by efficiency? Okay, a lot of people say, let's conserve our way out of the drought. Well, as an economist, most of us think, well, efficiency and storage are substitutes, right? I can increase one, decrease the other. They kind of move in opposite directions to get us into balance, okay? The problem is in California, they're not. They're complements, okay? And this would resonate with a lot of growers. If you think about it, is increasing efficiency in California involves investment, capital investment, right? Very drip irrigation is not cheap, okay? You're looking at thousands of dollars per acre to install this system, okay? So if I want to take my irrigation system, where before I had these siphon tubes and I sent water down a furrow and I watered my tomatoes, and that took a little bit of labor and almost no capital because the siphon tube is a piece of hose. And now I'm going to a system where I've got filters, I've got pumps, I've got varied drips, I've invested thousands of dollars into the system, okay? What's going to happen in a drought year? Am I going to increase my demand for storage or decrease my demand for storage? I'm going to increase it because I better run that thing every year or the bank's coming in and taking my farm, right? Because I just put all this capital into it. So they actually don't move in opposite directions. When you increase efficiency, because to increase efficiency you have to make huge capital investments, you increase the demand for storage to be sure that you're going to get a return on that capital investment every year. So they move in opposite directions as well. So the fundamental paradox is that there is no solution to the drought in California. Enough will never be enough. We need to learn how to live with drought. We need to learn how to live with variability in our water supply. Just like we need to learn how to live with variations in weather if you're dryland farming. So we'll always have this issue in California, and we really need to think more in terms of, yes, this doesn't mean don't do anything. It still means do everything, but it means think about the conversation, think about where we're going with drought in California, and what ultimately, do we want as a system there. So thank you very much, and it's good to be here. Thank you for questions.
This clock is 5 minutes fast. We've got a 20-minute break, so I'm going to let's see if we have a few questions.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the way that the laws work, and if you're changing some of the laws for how farmers are required to interact with their neighbors, how much water is off their land, how much what California is doing to help make that system
Okay. Yeah, so California has a very complex water rights system because of the way it was started. So we started off with riparian rights in California, which was, if you own land, and next to a stream, you can pour water off the stream onto your land. And then in 1914, we moved to an appropriative rights system, which was a first-in-time, first-in-right system. So whoever got there first, you could move water to lands that weren't adjacent to the stream as well. So when we get into the system of, we don't really account much for return flows in California. We don't account, as I mentioned, much for groundwater supply. Our water rights system is a mess, okay? We don't even know what the water rights are. There are people who are running around saying, my grandpa touched a note to a tree back in 1898 that says I get this water. And maybe great grandpa, I don't know. But anyway, and none of that's even tracked. So we have a system where we don't measure half of the water in the state, and we don't even know half of the water rights. We have a state agency, the State Water Resources Control Board, that's responsible for all of that. And there's actually some current legal battles going on to say, look, we need to quantify this. We can't manage it if we're not even measuring it, and we can't manage it if we don't even have a good list of who owes the what. So I would say that's an area for a lot of improvement. The problem is the people who have those rights are kind of hesitant to kind of, come to the table to discuss them. But it's definitely something I think we need to do a better job of. I'm not looking, when you get to that slide I had on reallocate water, give water from the environment to urban or ag to somebody. We've got a lot we can do before we need to do that, just in cleaning up our own act in terms of water rights and water management.
The process of desalination has been a feasible
So the question was, will the cost of desal ever get to the point where we use it for irrigation? Of course, the answer is yes and no, being economists. Well, the price of desal has gone down by 50% in the last 20, 25 years, mostly through membrane technology research. So it's a lot cheaper. It's competitive with urban water supplies in Southern California. That's what it's basically like that San Diego case. Now, so in general, the answer is no. I don't see it getting, to the point where desal is ever going to be cheap enough that we're going to use it as an agricultural supply. That said, in San Diego, there are avocado trees, and some of that desal water is going to those avocado trees. So there may be a few areas where it's going to work, like avocados in San Diego. That's why avocados are so expensive. And some of the vineyards, but not in general, and certainly won't get to the point where it's used on small grains or things like that. The only caveat to that, obviously, the biggest cost of desal is power. Okay, you got to pressurize the system. It forces the water through the membrane. So if somebody comes up with free electricity, then all bets are off. But other than free electricity, I don't see it being an agricultural water supply. But I do see it as an important water supply for the urban center.
Any other quick questions? Got one more.
Did I understand you were saying they're considering groundwater regulation or withdrawals? And if there's any other precedents for that kind of area?
Yeah, so the state passed in 2014 the very first statewide groundwater management law. And so what it does is it requires local communities to set up management agencies and bring those local basins into balance by 2040. Okay, so we do, and they have the power to tax, they have the power to put meters on wells, because most of our wells don't have meters. They have the power to limit and cut back on wells. So they are given the powers to do this. They also have the power to increase production through groundwater recharge projects. So, if we can get them keep this ball rolling and keep it going, I think eventually we will get to a good point where we're able to balance our groundwater supplies and manage them properly in the state. But yeah, it took a big drought until 2014 to actually get that kind of law passed.
Let's thank Doug one more time for. We also have a couple